All right, folks, we are live here, and we're going to be talking with Rav Mike Feuer about the great Torah portion that begins it all, which is called Genesis Bereshit. We're going to just wait a few more seconds for everybody to join up. And the topic for today's show is Genesis and the Big Bang. And if you get a chance, send in your comments right now. Tell us how you're seeing us, how we're sounding to you, and the topic and all the issues. So join us right now. Rav Mike Feuer is already with me here, and we're starting in about 20 seconds. Love to hear you say hi and shalom from wherever you are. You can already see the picture of the Big Bang, and that's what the Torah portion of Bereshit is. So we'll be starting just another second. Rav Mike, how do you say? Let me hear you. Let me hear 1, 2, 3.
Oh, 1, 2, 3.
You're sounding fabulous.
You couldn't come up with anything better than that?
You sound great. Okay, Golda says, good, I can hear it good. Zinni says, good morning from Nigeria. Julie says, Boker Tov from New York. So we're starting right here. Hold on 1 second. Let me just move the camera back just a tad. That's it. Okay. Should we start, Rav Mike? Are you ready to go?
All right. Ready to go.
Shalom, everybody, and welcome to the Yishai Fleisher Show, broadcasting live right now on Facebook, on Twitter, Periscope, and on YouTube, and, of course, on the Land of Israel network and podcast. And you are with us wherever you are. And thank you so much for people from all over the world that were already saying good morning from New York, from Nigeria, from Florida, and people are joining us from all over the place. It's a lot of fun. And we have an awesome thing to begin today, and we're going to begin in the beginning, okay? Because this is the Torah portion of Bereshit, of In the Beginning, and I am joined by our beloved guest, a regular, Rav Mike Feuer of JewishStory.co and RavMike.com. Rav Mike, shalom and welcome to the show.
Shalom, Yishai. It's good to see you.
I'm psyched. No, really, I just want to tell you, Rav Mike, I am psyched to see you today. Because yesterday was the last day of the holidays. Why do I say that? Because I put away my sukkah, okay? And my sukkah, to put it away, is a mammoth project. I'm talking about like 14, 15 very large boards and a lot of work and taking it down a lot of staircases. So it's a whole like day's project. So when that's done and when I put the sukkah away, I know that it's acharei hachagim, as we say in Israel, which means after the holidays, right?
Which means all that stuff we've been putting off by saying, listen, I'm going to deal with that acharei hagim, is now sitting squarely on your plate.
That's right. That's 100% correct. And also the reason I'm very excited to be with you today is because this means that you and I are beginning, I'm just guessing, maybe our fourth cycle through the 5 books of Moses with the Big Bang of the book of Genesis, the Torah portion of Bereshit.
It is the truth, although I have to say that because of both of our schedules, I don't know that we've ever actually hit every single parsha together.
That's okay, but we've been through the cycle together.
We have been through it. We have been through it many times at this point.
That's right. And so therefore you may ask, why would you want to listen to today's show if you've already probably listened for the last a few years, let's say, if you've listened to our program together? And the answer is because today I have a slightly different take. And of course, the Torah itself and alachad kama v'kama, and certainly the Torah portion of Bereshit can be understood on so many levels, and so many things can be brought out from it.
Hey, I mean, your question on our show could be asked for why are we reading this again this year? I mean, we've been doing it for 3,000 plus, so I mean, we're small potatoes in that equation.
That's right. But still, though, people want to listen to the show every year, and we got to come up with something new for them. And I'm just saying, the Torah is very much ready to deal with us asking tough questions and seeing it in a different way. And today's way that I wanted to go with you through the Torah portion of Bereshit is with some of the Rashis that basically point that there are many quirks in the process of creation. And right from the get-go, you learn that things are quirky, things that are beautifully created by God in kind of this, like a great vision of this is good, this is the way it should be. There's a lot of inside, if you're very didactic, if you're exacting, you'll find that there's a lot of funny little quirks. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Let's start with, here's my note. It says, the earth is not doing Hashem's will. Obviously, we're talking about the 6 days of creation, and the seventh is the Sabbath. And we learn about the trees. We learn about the trees, that the trees, God says to the trees, I want you to taste like the fruit and the trees got to taste in the same way.
Eitz
Right?
pri, ose pri.
All right, let's find that verse. We're talking
Verse
obviously about
11.
the book.
Chapter 1, verse 11.
Chapter 1, verse 11. Okay, great. And here's the Rashi. Here it is. Rashi said, the verse is, as you said, Vayomer Elohim, Tatsheh haaretz deshe, esav mazriah zera, etz pri oseh pri. May the land become grassy. There should be bushes, and there should be bushes that have seed, and a tree, a fruit, making
Fruit tree
fruit.
that tastes like a fruit tree that makes fruit.
Right, fruit tree that makes fruit. And so Rashi says, "Shiyatam ha'etz ketam pri," that the taste of the tree itself should be like the fruit, but it doesn't do God's will. And the next verse says, "V'totzeh haaretz etz oseh pri," a tree that makes fruit, not a fruit tree making fruit, but rather a tree that makes fruit, as in there's a separation between the tree and the fruit. And I thought to myself, boy, this is an interesting philosophical problem right from the get-go, which is like, what God says is like, okay, if you're a tree, and we know later on the Torah will liken a human being to a tree. If you're a tree, be what you give, what you show yourself with, what you're externally with, right? What you give out to the world, your fruit, should be just like what you are inside. But then the earth comes out with a fruit tree, which there's a tree part and there's a fruit part, and they're separate. So what you give is not actually what you are inside. You don't taste the same inside as you do to the outside. And I know that all of us at times feel like we're misunderstood, or somehow we feel like people don't see the real inside of us. And I thought to myself, maybe this is an example of that fruit tree right from the get-go that the tree itself doesn't want to taste like the fruit.
You know, Rav Kook calls this the alienation of product from process. Right, the fact that you should have been able to taste the sweetness of the end in all the steps along, and that was the original divine conception for the physical world. But this is a very important. I don't know how familiar you are with the Rashis here and the Midrashim around them, but I spend many hours teaching this in the following verse in my class at Pardes. What you're putting your finger on here is the first appearance of agency in creation. If you look carefully at the unfolding of the story up until now, God is the only real agent. It's true that the Rakia is described as dividing. That's dividing in the same way that a wall divides between two rooms, not in the way it actively. This is the first time. Let the earth bring forth. Mm-hmm. And so the earth becomes an agent in creation. And right away, there are two critical changes. You named one.
What you mean by an agent is that it has its own will. Is that what you're saying?
Well, careful. It's not so clear that will and agency are the same thing. It could just be a vehicle for God's unfolding will. But you're entirely correct that what happens, what emerges here, is that, there's two things. One, you've noted in verse 11, it says, Eitz pri oseh pri, fruit tree that makes fruit, whereas in verse 12, it's only a Eitz oseh pri, a tree that makes fruit. There's one change. Another change, which if you pick up the next Rashi on verse 12, Totzeh haaretz, right? In Totzeh haaretz deshe, he says, even though the grasses were not told to reproduce in their kind, the grass heard that the trees had been told to reproduce in their kind. They did a little bit of logical analysis about what God wants. And he points you toward a beautiful midrash in the Gemara in Chulin, which is worth studying. But why am I pointing it out? Because in these two verses, we see two very different types of agency. The trees don't do what they're told. The grasses do something which they were not yet told to do. Each one is a opening of space between God's will and the way creation expresses it. What's beautiful, as Rashi also points out, is that when Adam does the only three ways to express your will, remember, you can not do what you were told to do, you can do something you were not told to do, and you can do something you were told not to do. So who's the one who does something he's told not to do?
Who he does something that he's told not
to
do? That's Adam.
That's
Adam
Adam.
and Eve, right?
And when Adam is cursed, the snake is cursed and he loses his legs. Eve is cursed and the whole childbearing thing. Who gets cursed for Adam?
Adam.
No.
Oh, the earth. The earth is cursed.
The earth is cursed for his
because
sake.
of him, right?
And Rashi points out that it's the pun intended fruition of this process. He's Adam mina Adama lukach, right? He's taken from the ground. That's his name, because ultimately humanity is the real vehicle for agency and creation. Mm-hmm. Our task is to help the divine plan unfold. But real agency comes at a risk. You can not do what you were told, like the trees. Or you can do something you were told not to, like Adam. Or you could be like the grasses. And you can actually see what's coming and do something you were not yet told to do. This is the crux, in my humble opinion, of the entire process of creation here in verses 11 and 12. And I'm so excited you decided to start with it.
Yeah, this is great. I'm psyched. And what about the thing that I mentioned, which is like the very idea of like being in the inside tasting like the outside, like being like we have an expression in Hebrew,
Toho kabaro.
Toho kabaro, like what you say is what you actually are inside. You wear your heart on your sleeve, shall we say? You don't have people. You get what is the American expression now? You get what you pay for, or like straight talk, or you have
what you see is what you get.
What you see is what you get. That's what it is. What you see is what you get. Caveat emptor. You know what I mean? This is it. It's yours.
Yeah.
As opposed to something that's kind of hidden. Just parenthetically, by the way, one of the arguments against what's happening today on the internet with their gathering of information is that they're saying it's not that they don't have a right to gather the information. They're just not letting you know they're doing it. And so therefore there's something wrong about behaving in a way that you're not letting the other person know, hey, that's part of the deal.
Yeah.
You want to tell, okay, you want to do that, so you have to tell people, you know what I mean? And that's, at least let them make a choice. All right, so we got to keep going. The next quirk in creation that I found in the Medrash and Rashi is the sun and the moon are a little bit fighting, right? The
moon's fighting with God. The sun stayed out of it.
Right, but there's a jealousy, and I think that the theme of jealousy is one of the underlying themes. We'll get to it in the Torah portion of Bereshit. And basically, and you have to be very exacting in the words, which Rashi is. He says, it says the first words open up that there are two large lights. Shnei Meorot HaGdolim. There's two large lights. But the verse finishes off by saying the small light and the big light. To tell you, Rashi says, that at first they were created as equal lights. However, the moon was shrank. Why? Because the moon said it can't be that there's two kings that rule at the same time. So it's like, oh, you don't accept the idea that there'll be two co-equal kings? And we have that, of course, much later on with King David and Jeroboam, right? Yerovam ben Nevat, who's like, no. I got to walk first, says Jeroboam, right? I got to be the lead of it. So in any case, when you're like that, you get shrunken. And so here's like God creates the sun and the moon. You think that it's going to be swell, but the moon's complaining. And so therefore it gets kind of shrunken, and it gets smallified. So that's a little quirk in creation. What do you think?
Well, I mean, it's another powerful piece, because if you look at that midrash, it's the same midrash, by the way, that Rashi was referring to in Chulin. If anybody wants a copy of it, I'm happy to share it with them. You can get me on the email here. But what really happens as it unfolds is the moon complains. God says, "Lechi mi'etzmech," right? Go make yourself small, because the reality is jealousy shrinks us.
Right.
The moon is reflected light, and there's nothing to be done about that, because you can't have this moon be the sun, you can't have the sun be the moon. You have to be what you are. At the same time, the moon says, "Well, I gave a legit complaint, and you're going to punish me." So God tries to appease the moon, tries to give her all kinds of, the splits of stars, and they're going to count the Moadim by you, and I said, but nothing. In the end of the midrash, you know what happens? God repents and has Am Yisrael offer a sacrifice every month. The Korban Chatat, the sin offering of the monthly sin offering, is offered Lashem, says the Gemara, that we're trying to make up for God's failure built into creation. Meaning the moon's dissatisfaction, as we all know, if you start trying to measure yourself by other people's achievements, you'll never be happy. Period. Right. You have to be who you are.
Right.
At the same time, the Gemara recognizes that's true, but there's also hierarchy in the world, which might mean that indeed it's not fair. It's kind of like saying to a woman, listen, just be who you are and stay in the house. It's like, whoa. I mean, I'm happy to be who I am, but how come that's the way the world is made?
Right.
Yeah, it's a gender element in the way the Midrash actually
Right.
unravels.
And and there is a gender theme here. Moon, female. That's in almost every culture and society.
Well, they split, but the rabbis certainly saw the moon as feminine and the sun as
but also
masculine.
the 30-day cycle and all that. It's pretty obvious that the moon has a feminine aspect to it, and the sun has a male aspect to it. And of course, the apex of creation in the story of Genesis is going to be the 2 or even 2.5 versions of the creation of man and woman in this Torah portion. And so this is a foreshadowing of that. Let's keep going. The next quirk in creation, as noted by the Rashi, as Rashi is, I don't know if I want to get too stuck in this, but Monday does not get a kitov, but Tuesday gets 2 kitov. Right, you're right. Sheni, the Anglo way of saying that is Monday. Right, the second day of creation does not get any. It was good. That's because the creation of Monday, of the second day, was not completed, and it gets completed on the third day, Tuesday. And Tuesday, as we say in Hebrew, Pamayim Kitov, you get a double portion of good. And the rabbis go on and say that sometimes Mondays are days, and everybody knows you don't want to go back to work on Monday.
Hence the fact that we solve that problem in the Jewish state by starting our week on Yom Rishon.
Sunday, on Yom Rishon. That's right, on Yom Rishon. By the way, in Russian, Sunday has a very Christian name to it. So it's like the day of arising. We of course don't count that.
Well, but in the Greco-Roman tradition, Sunday was because of Sol Invictus, which was one of the intersections between the mythology of the ancient world and early Christianity. Mm-hmm. That's not an accident either. It's just less obvious in our familiarity with the language.
Very good. Okay, so that's therefore I appreciate that you're saying Yom Rishon, the first day. And so second day doesn't get a kitov, and it kind of gets pushed off when that work is completed on the third day. Just to point out that that creation isn't not every day gets a kitov. Not every day at the end of it do you finish your work, and sometimes your work gets finished on the next day, and you get pamayim hayesher koach a double chai. You get the blessing on the next day, but not always do you finish your work on that particular day. That's also something that our rabbis tell us, which is something I believe in very much and have had experience, that it's very important. They say, "Hamatchil b'mitzvah omrim lo gmor." If you start with a mitzvah, they tell you, finish it, get the job done. But like King David, he didn't have the right to finish building the temple, but he did everything to prepare for it. So he, in a sense, is like Monday, Yom Sheni, and Shlomo Melech, who got the chance to be both Shlomo Melech and to finish his father's work, got the Tuesday, which is Pamayim Kitov.
And there's also Lo Alecha HaMelacha Ligmor. The flip side is that even though you'll never finish the task, you're not free to desist from it. One quick word, and then I'll let you move on, is that this is another keystone Rashi. Because remember, Ki Tov, the idea of Tov, is the backbeat of the first chapter of creation. And yet we don't know what it means. It can't be understood in its normal moral sense as in opposition to Ra, to bad, because that doesn't appear even in potentia till the second chapter. Here, Rashi unfolds for us, what does the Tov of the first chapter of creation mean? It means perfectly reflective of the will of its maker. Mm-hmm. That when God says, Ve'alim ki tov, that God sees that the light or whatever is good, it's because it's perfectly reflective of God's will. Right. And that which is not yet complete is not yet good, which opens up the whole door for human agency once again. Right. The idea that creation might not yet be finished is what allows us to do ma'asim tovim, good deeds, which are really deeds that move creation toward the fulfillment of God's will.
It does say about Moshe Rabbeinu's mother, Yocheved, that she looks at this child, Vatar Kitov, she sees that he's good. I'm always like, no, that's the Kitov of the days of creation. She sees that he's going to help fulfill what you just said, which is to reflect God's will and the Maker's will in this world. He's going to be able to fulfill that.
And of course, one of the explanations that Kitov is that he was born mahul, that he was born circumcised.
Right.
Which is, now you understand. What does that mean? He was finished. Normally, circumcision is the act we do to finish creation of the human being. But Moshe was born Kitov.
Right. And also he saved his parents the cost of that of the.
Can you imagine what a moil cost in Egypt during the Shibud? It must have been outrageous. The danger pay alone.
Speaking of Moshe being born circumcised, God creates.
I want to hear that segue.
The segue is he's a messianic figure, and he's born perfect, and yet God created something in this world. Now here's inside baseball Judaism, and one which is like a little bit shocking. There's a phrase which is absolutely unique and interesting, which is chapter 1, verse 21. Vayivra Elohim et hataninim hagdolim. God created the large
sea monsters,
lizards. So Rabbi Eric Levy, his take is this is the dinosaurs. Okay, he says this is the dinosaurs, and he goes on a long explanation, which I thought was a pretty good one. And okay, so the dinosaurs get a mention here. By the way, no other animal. There's only 2 animals that get a mention, which is these giant lizards, sea creatures, and man. So
I mean, in specificity, as opposed to general category.
Right? But Rashi...
I mean, by the way, it's also the word vayivra. The verb create is only used in very specific application. The Ramban says create means to yesh me'ayin, that it's something from nothing. Everything else is asa, yatsa, right? But these were actually created. Mm-hmm. Which is what triggers the Rashi you're about to read.
Right. So Rashi says, well, it ain't no dinosaurs. What he says, he actually created these 2 giant sea creatures, the Leviathan. And this Leviathan, he made them male and female. But he had to kill off the female. Right? So he created them male and female, like the sun and the moon, like Adam and Eve. But he had to kill off the female because had they procreated, then the world would not be able to withstand their great power. Now the male one is swimming around somewhere and will be brought to the table of the righteous in the world in the time to come.
The female one. He kills the female, salts her, and God's going to serve herring to the righteous in the world to come.
What happens with the male one?
Well, the male one, God is msachekikto kol yom b'mishmeret harevi'it. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah says that there's a certain point at night where God's done with all God's work, and what God does is play with the Leviathan, with the Leviathan.
Like coming home and playing with the golden retriever at the end of the day.
It's something like that. But also beautifully, we just left the sukkah, and I'm sure that you say the prayer for the departure from the sukkah.
You bet I do.
And what did you say? We should merit next year to sit where?
In the sukkah of the skin of the Leviathan.
Right. So they say that the Gemara says that in addition to eating herring made from the flesh of the female Leviathan in that time to come, we're all going to sit in the sukkah made from the skin of the male that God will slaughter.
Okay. That's where my confusion is. That's where my confusion. So you're saying the male one gets slaughtered at the end of time, but we eat the fishy, godly snack, the herring, with what other people drink is scotch. I drink vodka, but okay. Now, I mean,
wait, you know the old yeshiva joke, right?
Which one is
why is God going to serve fish to the tzaddikim at the final meal?
Why?
Because the tzaddikim won't trust God's kashrut. Anyway. Sorry. Talk about inside baseball.
I mean, first thing is, okay, so like what? Like there's these. I mean, and the biggest one of them all is, had you just told me that God created a Leviathan. And I'll be like, okay. But if you told me, no, he created man and female, but had they been left to procreate, they would have destroyed the world. So therefore, you have to kill off the female one and salt her. It's like, I don't get, like, to me, that's a quirk in creation. Like what happened there what was it? Like and of course I'm saying tongue in cheek. Is it like a mistake? Right. Or no, right from the get-go, there was an understanding that something can't go on.
Well, I mean, what you're putting out actually in all of these pieces is that there's a tension between the human consciousness as it relates to creation and the divine intent. Because the divine intent is perfect. There can't be no process. But human consciousness is an unfolding existence by definition. So process is all we know. Each of these pieces, the tree, the moon, Leviathan are all situations where it looks like you said, like it was a mistake. God intended it one way, saw, oh, that's not going to work. Got to do it another way. But the other way to look at that is that all process is essentially controlled failure. Right? If there were no failure, there'd be no process. You would just simply do everything. Right? It bespeaks the human relation to, on one hand, an understanding of the potential for perfection, on the other hand, an experience, and also our source in the very imperfection, which again is going to play itself out in the Bible quite beautifully. That we're, I think, in all honesty, one of the most important lessons the Torah comes to teach is that failure is not an accident.
Right.
It is in fact an essential element of creation, and this is really where we differ from the early Christian notion of original sin as having sort of ruined the world. But this is, maybe we'll wait till we get to chapter 3.
We're going to get there in a second. I just want to put up on the screen right now that Chaim David's.
Leviathan.
You just gave me a new a name for a new herring item on my menu.
If any way I can help.
That's right. So that's exciting, and that's going to be a lot of fun.
That was, by the way, the Pickle King of Gush Etzion, if people don't know.
What's that? I missed what you said.
You didn't know who that was? That was the Pickle King of Gush Etzion.
Yes, of course I know who Chaim is. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm a fan. I'm a big fan, and I come from a long line of being friends with various Pickle Kings, including the Nadel family, which were Pickle Kings of New Jersey, Patterson. In any case, let's go to another quirk of creation, and that is chapter 1, verse 22, and that God blessed the fish. He blessed the fish. He blessed the fish. It says he blessed the fish, and why did he bless the fish? I was going to skip this one, but because I know that you're like into environmentalism, I wanted to like say this one because of over what's the technical word? Overfishing.
Overfishing. That's what's called.
Like they're pulling out They're pulling out too many fish. Mankind is going to pull too many fish out of the sea, and God gave him a special blessing to continue to procreate, to be fruitful, and so therefore they'll exist. But what about the other animals? Why didn't they get a blessing? Well, because of the snake that was going to screw up, and so therefore God did not want to give the animals a blessing so that the snake would be within the blessing of all the animals. So all the animals don't get a blessing now, they get a blessing later, and the fish get a blessing because they're really not so blessed because they get eaten a lot. And so therefore they need a special blessing because they get a lot of eatings. And the animals, they can't get the blessing because the snake is amongst them. And he needs to separate him out and to give him a blessing later.
It's a tough one. I mean, on some level, the fish are always an exception. There's a midrashic perspective, which has, I think, a solid base also in Pshat, that the fish weren't destroyed during the flood with Noach either. Right? And we know, of course, fish also are neither, fish nor fowl. They're neither milk or meat. Right, they're parv, and in fact, they don't even fall under the prohibition of Aver Min HaChai, of the
you can eat a live fish.
You can eat a live fish. Just wash fish called Wanda.
That's right.
Anybody who gets the reference, feel free to also contact me.
That's right.
Don't eat the green ones; they're not ripe yet. So why am I mentioning this? Is because fish, on some level, are a simplicity of creation, and therefore its fruitfulness is only good. Whereas once we get into the animal kingdom, and the snake really represents that bridge between humanity and the animal kingdom. Because remember, humanity does get the bracha purvu umilu et haaretz, right, to be fruitful and fill the land, although it doesn't necessarily work out well, at least in the first iteration, because God ends up destroying that whole world and then repeating that blessing to Noach and his sons, which is a whole separate story here, but it's an important one, is that the fish, in their simplicity, there's nothing wrong with the open-ended reproduction. The animal world, because it can go either way, blessed or cursed, right? God is not willing to just give a blanket blessing until there's a beirur, until there's a clarification, which is, again, one of the themes that the Torah plants right here at creation, is that there's always the essential and the secondary. There's the blessed and the cursed. People don't like these binaries in our world today. That doesn't necessarily change their reality. We might be able to transcend them in certain ways, but here, that's, I think, an important message, if you follow what I'm saying.
I know exactly what you're saying. I like that very much. And just to remind people that we actually think of fish as kind of blessed. We eat fish on Shabbat. There's like the fish also somehow have a way to not have ayin hara. They kind of, ward away the evil eye. But of course, keep that well within this side of idolatry and superstition.
And
I just
magic.
understand that. Right, and fish have a good. I mean, on the other hand, when you take it too far, a great example is the fish. The Philistines. It says in the book of the beginning of the book of Samuel. Samuel 1. It talks about how the Philistines had a fish god named Dagon, and he was half man, half fish, and basically the Ark of the Covenant destroyed the fish god when it was hanging out with them.
That's
okay,
right. Fishy story.
That's a really very fishy story, and it stinks from the head. But here's what I want to say is that let's now get to one of the most famous of challenging verses in the whole Bible. And what's so great about the Bible, the Torah, is that it didn't wait too long to have a challenging verse, right?
Right from the beginning.
Right,
first line.
Right, first line. But here's the really famous one. So famous that the Septuagint, the Greek translation, which is in the 3rd century BC, the Greek translation basically gets rid of this verse and sanitizes it, because what it says is, and this is chapter 1, verse 26, God said, Vayomer Elohim na'aseh adam b'tzalmeinu kidmuteinu. Let us create man in our image, in our likeness and in our image. Okay, so first thing is, I think that I got a great thought yesterday. I think that I had a great thought about what this verse means on the simplest level of them all.
What's that?
Here's my simple thought. This is the story of creation. We know that there's also a whole world of hosts of a creation in the spiritual spheres that is not seen to our eyes. We don't know what these things really are. Some great rabbis have been up. There's a whole Kabbalistic literature of these echalot, these palaces and rooms up in heaven and different levels. So with one tiny verse, God says to us, I'm not going to let you in, but I'm letting you know right now, there are also, in creation, I also created angels. I created another world. And the way I just let you know is that I'm just talking amongst them. And therefore, that's just a peek. Yes, there's also another creation in the creation process, which is the upper creation. That was my take on that, a simple take. But what do you think? You like that?
I know, I very much like that, and it echoes the midrash that Rashi brings, where Rashi says that we learn from this God's humility, that right. Even though in God's greatness, God independently creates humanity. God's always worried about this jealousy, as you said, and in reality, humanity resembles the angels and not God. Right. And so therefore, God's basically getting their permission, as it were. Say, like, folks, I think we should do this. Should we do this? Should we do this? Right. And one of the things that my rabbi always said to us, which to me is the most powerful, is that with all the problematics in this verse, and people find Rashi's answer somewhat strange, like suddenly, like angels, where did they come from, etc. What it shows is that humanity is created with a question. So everything else in creation is a statement, as it were. Humanity is created with a question, which more than anything else is a representation of the divine within, because it's unbounded.
Fabulous.
Yeah, like Daniel Cohen. It's very important. Very much. The last thing for the sort of shot readers out there to understand is that the Torah represents not just God's thoughts on man, but also the evolution of human language, right? And so therefore, when he says Elohim, Elohim, of course, in the simple reading is a plural, and it's one of the great revolutions of Hebrew thought that what humanity had experienced as a plurality of powers, we understood to be a singular will, right? So therefore, we maintain the plurality, but we treat it as singular. Here, the verse begins plural, but then it says the next line, V'yivra Elohim, in the singular, meaning that you see a certain evolution of human language, which God is giving space for, because the Torah is first and foremost a tool for education and the cultivation of consciousness. And if you can't start where people actually exist, you can't teach them. And the people to whom the Torah was handed saw a plurality of gods in the world, and the purpose of the Torah was to train them, to draw them toward the truth of God's unity. And these two verses, of course, speaking about the human condition, are the most important in that respect,
Right.
which is why it doesn't say that for the rest of them. Because, like, well, badly, like, who cares? Like the fish, the birds. Let's talk about what really matters, you know?
Now, our rabbis tell us that one of the reasons that Sinai is called Sinai is because it sounds like the word sin'ah, which is hate. Is when the Jews received the Torah, it also brought down hate. Why? Right, because people would be jealous. There's jealousies. And here in the creation of mankind, there's two separate jealousies that Rashi points out to. One jealousy is that the angels would be jealous of mankind. Like, what? You're making this thing in our image, and now there's like this competition. We thought we were the pinnacle of creation. And on the other side of the same Rashi, he says, he tells the angels, Yesh elyonim, yesh ba'elyonim kidmuti. You angels, you guys look like me, and therefore in the upper spheres there's something that looks like me. Im ein kidmuti gam b'tachtonim. If there's not something that looks like me in the lower dimensions, there's going to be jealousy in the creation of Genesis. There's going to be a creation in the lower spheres that there's no godly representation. So you see that jealousy, like the creation of man, either fulfills, either causes jealousy, or is the resolution of jealousy in both of these directions.
You know, and that theme of jealousy doesn't go away. It's certainly not in Breshit. And I was thinking about it earlier, some of the work that I'm doing on the different projects.
It's going to lead to the first murder, which is at the end of this Torah portion.
But what I was thinking about is that sometimes the reality is doing the right thing, even though it evokes jealousy or conflict, just needs to happen anyway, if it's the right thing. I was thinking about, in particular, in the relationship between Sarah, Avram, and Hagar. Mm-hmm. Which is, it's a tough story. We'll speak out at the time of Sarah driving out Hagar, and like I look at all the attempts to justify it. On some level, you don't have to justify. You can say, "Yeah, this is tough. It was harsh." That's also sometimes necessary. It doesn't make it nice or good, but sometimes God says, "I'm going to make humanity. It's going to be tough for the angels."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, okay, great segue to the next one, which is chapter 2, verse 18. Which is, it's not good for man to be alone, right?
Yeah.
It's not good for man to be alone. I'll make him a companion, a other, a helper, and
help Rashi stand against him,
right, or against him, right? Rashi says, this is very interesting. He says, man cannot be alone because people will say there are two gods in this world, right? God is alone in the upper spheres and man is alone in the lower spheres. And so therefore there'll be a sense that a human being, a man, is a god in the lower spheres. And therefore I'm going to create a kenegdo, right? Which will bring him down a notch and make him like the animals, procreative and eating of that kind of thing. He's not a god. So in a sense, this Rashi is exactly the opposite of what we said before, which is, you are like me. I actually created you in a way to be not like me by creating an other for you, just making you more like an animal.
Yeah, I'm going to offer a different reading on that, which is based in the Maharal of Prague, who points out that the initial verse that we just read before about Adam being created b'tzelem Elohim, in the image of God, is bound up with what we would call gender. Right? It's hard to barotam, right? And you look at the verses are very confusing. It's baroto, barotam. You created them. But what's very clear is that the divine image is bound up with the gender relationship. And so what I would offer you here is that actually humanity has the capacity to be godly and not like an animal. And it's davka, the spousal relationship, that makes it possible. We can't do it alone. That's what God wants. You don't want to be able to do it alone, right? But if you have to do it in partnership, that shows that you have God within you, but not completely. And then of course, that the sort of the male-female model of partnership, which is the base of the Torah's conception of family, becomes a model for all relationship. Meaning, there's a masculine energy and a feminine energy, even with one's relationship to oneself and peers, etc. But understanding and negotiating that tension is an ezer kenegdo. You help by standing against. Just picture, you ever do that mixer, the icebreaker, where you sit on the ground with your back to someone and they say, stand up without touching the floor? You ever do that one?
No.
No, you've never done that? So you
No.
sit back to back with someone. The way you do it is by pushing against each other.
Uh-huh.
And when you push against each other, you rise.
Right.
And that's the Ezer Connecto to help by standing against.
I like what you're saying very much, and I think you're right. But at the same time, the Rashi there seems to indicate that it's like, wait a minute, I want to knock you off your perch just a tad to remind you that you're human as opposed to godlike. And so I'm just, in the theme that I'm trying to develop together with you is this like theme of like these jealousies. Remember the moon and the sun and other things. It's like yeah, like God says, like, I'm the sun, you have to be the moon a little bit, and I got to bring you down to and by the way, the very end of the story of Adam and Eve, there's going to be a statement like, we did wait a minute, we did the same thing, just like the moon shrank, so too did the Leviathan, right? The female Leviathan has to be killed off because it's like too powerful, this thing. So if it goes by itself, it's like a god or a destroyer of the world. So too man has got to be kind of shrunk a little bit. And at the end of the Garden of Eden story, when man and woman fails, he's got to get kicked out. Why? Because if he hits this tree of life, he kind of is going to be. We don't want him to reach that tree of life, says the Torah. We don't want him to reach that and be all powerful, all knowing. He's got to be a notch down.
Just remember that the tree of life wasn't forbidden to Adam until he ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Right. There was the tree of life. Right.
Right. Meaning the. I don't agree with the reading that what God's trying to do is sort of like lower Adam toward the animals. When I read this Rashi, what Rashi is saying is that if he was capable of doing it on his own, that would be the problem. Therefore, humanity needs to understand that our power is in partnership, which is therefore going to ensure that we don't attempt to wrest the world away from God, which unfortunately is a major theme of the Torah. People who attempt, like these are the ultimate sins of human idolatry.
And we will read about those sins that are specifically discussed in the Torah portion of Noach. Yes. Both in either criminality or in actually constructiveness in the Tower of Babel, where the humanity tries to defeat God or be a god. Nietzsche said, Nietzsche, God is dead. Nietzsche is dead, right? Remember that one? Right. And let's just touch that, and we have limited time because you got to get to your class. So let's hit one last one.
This is like prep, so it's good.
Yeah, good. I'm happy. See. This one is I guess the pinnacle of all jealousies, or maybe the pinnacle of jealousies is in the story of Cain and Abel, Cain v'Hevel. But in this case, it's the snake.
Ooh.
And this is chapter 3, verse 5. Great Rashi on the verse that says that snake says to Eve, he says, Ki yodea Elohim, God knows. Ki b'yom achalchem mimenu, when you eat from the tree of knowledge, good and bad, v'nifkechu einechem, your eyes will open, ve'item ke'Elohim, and you'll be like God. Yodei tov v'ra, knowing good and evil. By the way, like today, it's like you kind of wonder about that. Like, why do I even want to know good and evil? Can't I just chill? There's like too much knowing good and evil in this world. But in any case, Rashi has a great commentary here, and he says like this, and he says, Kol uman, anybody who's an expert in their field, in any action or any field, soneh et bnei umanuto, hates their competitors in that field. And so the snake says, God, he ate from the tree of knowledge, good and bad, and now he wants to keep you away from it.
Yep.
Through eating from this tree, he created worlds. He created the world, and he does not want you to eat from it so that you are not powered like him. Okay, so to me, this is the reason I'm always fascinated by this, and my friend Alex Trayman, which I've quoted many years in a row, explained this thing to me, but just the idea that the snake says, God is very small. He is not that you could be like him. He's like you. He's got these jealousies. He just wants to keep you from power. He just wants to keep you from being known and have success. He wants to keep the power for himself. So it's not that you're like him. He's really like you. He's small like that. Instead of really realizing that the whole chapters of Genesis is about God loving and giving, and therefore creating a world from love and just giving and creating life. The snake says, you see this whole thing around you? It's just trying to keep you away from power. God is very small. He's a petty tyrant, if you will.
I mean, there's so much in this, and I'm not quite sure how to hold back. But one of the things to remember is that the snake is the only person who ever says only what he means throughout the entire story. Mm-hmm. Let's just be clear on that. That doesn't make him good. It doesn't make him necessarily honest, but he's the only one who only says what he means. Because when you notice, he says that God, God knows that when you eat it, and your eyes are open, you'll be like Elohim. And then if you look at the end of the chapter, after they indeed eat, and God has the whole confrontation with Adam, on line 22, it says, "V'yomer Hashem Elohim, Hein Adam haya kechad mimenu." Hey, man's like one of us. Ladat tov v'ra, knowing good and evil. Now, if he sticks out his hand and he takes the tree of life, suddenly you realize the snake wasn't entirely lying, right? That in fact, this line is the one more than anything else that begs the questions. Where did the snake come from? Where did he come from? And how does he know exactly what everybody's thinking? He knows what God told Adam. He knows what Adam told Eve. He knows how to manipulate Eve well enough to get her not only to do what he wants, but to do what he wants Adam to do. So I'll offer to you this, and I'm going to have to run momentarily, is that the snake emerges from the separation between Adam and Chava. Mm-hmm. Because separation is simultaneously the opportunity for relationship and the space for jealousy and desire. Right? And as you're pointing out, that God's goal in creation is real relationship. Real relationship is founded on separation. I have a real relationship with someone who's just a yes man who says, "Oh yeah, you're right, Mike. You're right, Mike. You're right." That's not a relationship. That's a robot.
Right.
Relationship happens as a kinegdo, someone who helps by saying no, by disagreeing, by offering their own opinion. The problem is that process of separation between creation and God is messy because it goes in od milvado. There's nothing other than God.
Right.
The snake is that space. The snake fills that space because God wants humanity. We're created in the image of God. We're already like God. And the snake says, no, you're like you said, you're going to shrink God to your smallness. Don't expand to God's greatness. Mm-hmm. So these verses that you're touching on, and I say the whole sort of mahalach, the whole process of learning that you're offering for the chapter here is very important in understanding the sort of power and fraught potential of human consciousness as the fruit of creation, because it allows us to stand away from God, but offers the beauty of relationship as well. Right.
And the perfection and the imperfection, the creation that, as you said before, like that is the real creation. It's not some kind of painting. There's the little quirks, the little developments, they are the real creation. And I know you got to go. So the last phrase is just to prove your point, which is the famous phrase in chapter 3, verse 12, that Adam says, "The woman that you gave with me, Vayomer Adam, Aisha asher natata imadi, the woman that you gave to me or with me, he natna li me'etz v'chal, she gave me from this tree and I ate." Rashi says in very tight words, kafar betova. Kan kafar betova. He was the ingrate of the goodness. The woman, with all the challenges that relationship brought, was a goodness. And he, instead of sharing that goodness and sharing the challenge, put blame and division.
But appreciate how profound it is, because remember, lo tov hiot adam levado. The lo tov, the non-good of world, is being alone. Right. So God gives Adam, the woman, to understand what it is to get together, in hopes that Adam will then turn to God and be together. Now God turns to Adam and says, "Now go back. What did you do? The trees didn't do what they were told to do. The grasses did something they weren't told to do. Adam does something he was told not to do. But he's only cursed when he's kafui tov." You know what the real sin of Adam was? And I'll end with this because I got to jump. It wasn't eating the fruit. Imagine if he ate the fruit and God looked at him and says, "What did you do?" And Adam said, "Listen, God, we got to talk." That's a whole different level of relationship if Adam owns his behavior.
We screwed up.
That's what I mean. Like,
we
screwed up. Right. I did it. And God, you know what? God might have said, beautiful. You took responsibility. You have agency and responsibility. That's what I want from humanity. Instead, what Adam did was he tried to take his agency and avoid his responsibility. His sin was blaming Eve.
That's right. Rav Mike Feuer, thank you so much for joining us. Your website is jewishstory.co. That's where your other podcast is about Jewish history, which is fabulous, and also ravmike.com. It's a brand new website, and it has really connections to all that you do, your articles, your teachings at Pardes, and also your spiritual guidance that people can really connect to. So check it out, ravmike.com and jewishstory.co. I want to thank you very much. And again, I want to bless you for great beginnings of doing the book of Genesis together, and also all the other students. So thank you so much for joining me, and have a Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
All right, Rav Mike, thank you so much for joining us. And just wanted to also thank you folks for being with me from all over the world. And that's a lot of fun. And Wade says my mic is a little bit low compared to Rav Mike. I wish you'd have told me earlier. I would have fixed it. But in any case, yeah, Rav Mike's mic is hotter than mine. God bless his soul. I do also want to thank all the good people that make this show possible, including our awesome sponsors. For example, I'm putting it up on the screen right now, which is Blessed by Israel, blessedbyisrael.com. If you want great products from the land of Israel, I'm talking about olive oil and great gifts and things that will really connect you to the land of Israel, bring the land of Israel to you, and thereby you could also fight against BDS and all those folks that want to make Israel small, especially now during the Corona season. You can't fly here, so let it fly to you. So check out Blessed by BUY Israel.com. You stick in that coupon code Yishai, you'll get, I think, 12% off. Bang. And let me know also, write me an email, Yishai@YishaiFleisher.com or Yishai@thelandofisrael.com. Let me know if it's working well for you. It's important for me to know that my sponsors are doing a great job for you. That's very important for me. Please check out the good folks at JewishPress.com. Jewish Press is a wonderful news site, and they always feature the Yishai Fleisher Show, and I really appreciate the partnership with them, and they are a great news service, and I really like their email especially, which is called the Jewish Express, right, which is Jewish Press, but Express coming into your mailbox. I came up with that term years ago, so that's really neat. And one of our big partners today, a new partner and a proud partner, is Natural Goodness from the Holy Land, through the embodiment of Salves of Jerusalem. Salves. It has the word like salvation in there. And it is salvation for your skin and for your health. Check out Salves of Jerusalem. They make organic stuff. It's coming right from the homeland, and it'll just make you glow like Moses' face. I'm telling you. That's what they should have. They should have a Moses face glow. But in any case, what they do have is found at salvesofjerusalem.com, and they're a proud sponsor of the show. Thank you very much. HebronFund.org. That is an incredibly important portal to support and defend the Jewish community of Hebron and the tomb of the patriarchs and matriarchs. Next time you're in the land of Israel, you got to go to Jerusalem, of course. That's where you see the God of Israel. And you also have to go to Hebron to connect with and meet the forefathers and mothers. In the meantime, check out HebronFund.org and please support their important work, our important work. I work for the Jewish community of Hebron. And almost finally, Tchelet.com, which is the biblical blue, is back. That is the light blue string on your tzitzit. Of course, I forgot to mention before, coupon codes. Everywhere you go, the coupon code's the same. Yishai, and you get percentages off, and then they know that you came through the show, and that's good for the world, and that's good for you to have Tchelet. You'll be so proud to wear your own Tchelet, I promise you. It's awesome, or give it to a friend, and it's a great way to start the new year. Finally, I want to urge you to check out YishaiFleisher.com. Now, if you're listening to this on podcast, please, leave a rating and all that stuff. It really makes a difference, and it helps the almighty algorithm work in our favor. That means it works in God's and Torah's favor, the God of Israel and Torah's we're hoping to broadcast from here. So check out all my other stuff at YishaiFleisher.com. And of course, leave a donation there. For God's sakes, it helps keeping the broadcasting live and awesome and free and spread out to the whole world. So check out the donate page there. And of course, our host on the podcast network, which is the Land of Israel, thelandofisrael.com, an awesome network which I'm so proud to be associated with. Finally, the greatest sponsor of them all is the God of Israel. And thank you so much, God of Israel, for letting us broadcast from Judea, from Jerusalem, from Hebron to the world. What an honor and a pleasure it is to be with you here live. And thank you so much for wherever you are. Here, Chuck Booth says, wonderful insights. Thank you to both. Thank you, Chuck. And my good friend Michael says, and so much amazing teaching this morning. And Lou says, thank you for the beautiful Dvar Torah, Yishai and Rav Mike. So thank you, folks, for being with us. I really do want to send from here my blessings to you, God's blessings to you, for awesomeness, for a great year, and for Genesis. Get out there and like bang, start your day turned on with a new breath of life, a new kind of empowerment to get into this winter and to be as strong and as successful as possible, and really to be a reflection of God's light as much as we can in all of our lives. I want to thank Ben Bresky and Tabitha and Moshe for getting the show out to the world. And I want to do a special thank you to my brother Josh Fleisher, who is an amazing videographer here. If you want to look for him, he's called Observant Jew on Instagram, and he's awesome. And he helped me with a new setup in my room, in my studio. So that's really cool. So thank you, Josh. And thank you to all of you. More great stuff is on the way. Stay tuned, stay connected, stay calm, and stay rocking, because we got great things to do in this great life that we've been given. So shalom and blessings.